My mother-in-law moved in and tried to replace me in my own marriage. Full story. For the first year of our marriage, my mother-in-law lived in another state. For the second year, she lived in my guest bedroom, slept in my bed when I was at work, rearranged my kitchen, and quietly tried to replace me as my husband's real family. My husband said I was overreacting and being dramatic. Until the night I packed her bags myself and drove her to a hotel. I'm a 28-year-old woman, my husband is 30, and his mom is 58. We'll call her Linda. Before we got married, I honestly thought Linda and I had a pretty good relationship. She was a little intense, very opinionated, but she'd also send me recipes, ask about my job, and tell me she was so excited to have a daughter-in-law. I believed her. My husband, Matt, is an only child. His dad died when he was a teenager, and it's always been him and his mom against the world. I knew they were close. What I didn't fully understand was that he'd been raised to be her emotional husband. When we were dating, there were small red flags I brushed off. If Matt and I had weekend plans, Linda would call crying because her sink was clogged or she felt lonely, and he'd drop everything. If we went on vacation, she'd text him constantly. Pictures of her dinner, screenshots of the weather, updates on the cat. When we posted our engagement, she commented, "I guess I have to share him now," pleading face, which I thought was a joke. It wasn't. When we were planning the wedding, she tried to insert herself into every decision. She showed up to my dress fitting wearing white to show support, insisted we use her florist, and cried when we decided to have the ceremony in my hometown instead of hers. At one point she said, "This wedding is hard for me, you know. I'm losing my baby." Matt hugged her and said, "You're not losing me, Mom. You're just gaining her." I told myself it was coming from a place of love and grief. I didn't want to be the evil daughter-in-law stereotype, so I let a lot slide. After the wedding, Linda went back to her state. We live about 8 hours away by car. For a while things were calm. She'd visit for a weekend every couple of months, we'd visit her on holidays, normal stuff. Then she lost her job. She called Matt sobbing. Her company downsized, she didn't have a lot of savings, her rent was going up, and she had no idea what to do. Matt immediately went into superhero mode. "Maybe she can move here for a while," he said that night. "Just until she gets back on her feet. She could stay in the guest room. It would help her so much." My gut clenched. I asked, "What does for a while mean? A couple weeks? A month?" He said, "I don't know, a few months maybe. You love my mom, right? We can help her." I caved. I didn't want to be the villain. I said, "Okay, as long as it's temporary. And we need boundaries. She's not moving in permanently." He promised. He said all the right things. "Of course it's temporary. I'll be clear with her. You're my wife, this is our home." Spoiler, he was not clear. Linda arrived with more luggage than I had when I moved into our house. Not just clothes, but boxes of dishes, decorations, even her own bedding. I remember thinking, this looks less like a visit and more like a move. The first few days were fine. She cooked dinner, insisted on doing the dishes, bought us groceries as a thank you. I started to relax. Maybe I'd overreacted. Then the small things started. One morning I opened the fridge and everything was rearranged. My labeled meal prep containers were shoved to the back. The stuff she bought was moved to the front. My spices vanished from the cabinet. I eventually found them in a different drawer, organized her way. I made a comment like, "Oh, I guess my paprika moved neighborhoods," trying to keep it light. She smiled and said, "I just fixed things a little. Your system didn't make sense. Now it's easier for us." Us, as in her and Matt. I let it slide. A few days later, I came home from a long shift and walked into my bedroom to change, and found Linda lying on my side of the bed, scrolling through her phone. She jumped a little when she saw me. "Oh, I was just resting, honey. The guest bed is too firm for my back. Matt said I could lie in here." Our room smelled like her perfume. I felt weirdly violated, but I didn't want to start a war over a nap. I told her, "It's okay to rest, but please don't use our bed without asking. It's a little personal." She pouted. "I raised that boy in this bed size since he was a baby. I've seen him naked thousands of times. It's not like I haven't been in his room before." I didn't even know how to respond to that. That night, I told Matt I wasn't comfortable with his mom hanging out in our bed. He said, "She was just napping, babe. Don't make it weird. Her back hurts." I said, "She has a whole guest room. If the mattress is too firm, we can get a topper." He sighed and said I was being rigid. That was the first real crack. Over the next weeks, Linda's helpfulness escalated into control. If I cooked, she'd hover behind me, critiquing. "Too much salt. You should brown the meat first. Matt doesn't like garlic that much." If I set the table, she'd reset it. "He prefers this fork on that side." When I did laundry, she'd take his clothes out of the hamper and wash them herself, just his. Once I found a stack of his folded t-shirts in the guest room, smelling like her detergent. I asked Matt, "Did you ask your mom to do your laundry?" He laughed. "She insisted. She loves doing it. It makes her feel helpful." I said, "It makes me feel like I'm co-parenting you with your mother." He rolled his eyes. "Don't be dramatic." Then came the comments. Little digs, always coated in sugar. When I left early for work, she'd say, "You poor things, both working so much." When Matt was growing up, I always made sure he never had to worry about chores. He should be focusing on his career. Translation: I'm failing as a wife because he does anything around the house. If I mention wanting kids someday, she'd say, "You'll have to be careful with your schedule. Babies need their mother at home." I stayed home with Matt, and that's why we're so close. When I sat next to him on the couch, she'd sometimes wedge herself between us, saying, "Mama Spot," like it was a joke. But the worst part was how Matt started changing. He began defaulting to her in little decisions. What to eat for dinner, whether we watched a movie or a game, how we should rearrange the living room for more space. He stopped doing his share of chores because Mom already did it, and if I complained, he'd say, "She likes feeling needed." I felt like I was slowly being replaced in my own home. After about 6 weeks, I hit my first major breaking point. I came home from work one evening and went straight to the kitchen to start dinner. I opened the trash can and saw an entire meal's worth of prepped containers, the lunches I'd made for myself for the week, thrown away. I froze. Linda walked in humming, wiping her hands on a towel. I said as calmly as I could, "Did you throw away my meal prep?" She smiled like it was no big deal. "Oh, those? Yes. They looked old, and you shouldn't be eating reheated food all week. It's not healthy. I made a casserole instead. You can take leftovers." "I made those yesterday," I said. "They weren't old. And I specifically weighed everything for my diet." She shrugged. "You're young, you don't need to worry so much. Matt likes my cooking better anyway." Something in me snapped a little. I said, "Please don't throw away my food again. That's money and time." She raised her eyebrows. "I was just trying to help. No need to get snippy." That night, I told Matt I wanted to set boundaries. I said, "I need your mom to stop rearranging the kitchen, stop going through our bedroom, and stop undermining me. I'm not okay with her staying indefinitely." He got defensive immediately. "She's going through a lot," he said. "She lost her job, her home, her husband died years ago. She's alone. Can you try to be more understanding?" "I am understanding," I said. "That's why I agreed to this at all. But this was supposed to be temporary. She's acting like this is her house and I'm the guest." He said, "You're exaggerating. She loves you. She's just particular about things." We argued in circles. Every time I gave a concrete example, he minimized it. "You're mad about food? She just did my laundry, what's the big deal? She's always been like this, you're taking it personally." We went to bed angry. The next day, Linda acted like nothing happened. She made pancakes, called me sweetheart, and asked about my shift. It was almost more infuriating. 2 months in, she still hadn't seriously looked for work. When I asked how the job hunt was going, she'd say things like, "Oh, there's nothing out there for people my age," or, "I'm just waiting for the market to turn." Meanwhile, she watched daytime TV and reorganized my closets. I gently suggested she might want to talk to a career counselor, or maybe look at remote work. She smiled tightly and said, "Matt says I don't need to rush. He wants me here." That night I asked him, "Did you tell your mom she can stay as long as she wants?" He hesitated. I told her she doesn't need to panic. I didn't want to stress her out. I said, "So yes, you told her this is basically her new home." Without asking me, he said, "It's our home. And she's family." I said very quietly, "So am I." We didn't resolve that one either. The final straw happened around the 3-month mark. I had an especially exhausting week. Short-staffed, double shifts, one truly awful case involving a child. I was running on fumes. On Friday, I texted Matt and asked if we could have a quiet date night. Just the two of us. Takeout movie, nothing fancy. He said, "Yeah, that sounds nice." I came home that night looking like death. I walked in, kicked off my shoes, and heard laughter from the kitchen. Linda had set the table with candles, nice plates, a full meal for two. Matt and Linda. She was wearing a dress and lipstick. There was wine already poured, 2 glasses. I stood there in the doorway, sweaty and drained, holding my lunch bag. "Oh," Linda said brightly. "You're home early. I thought you had a late shift." "I switched with someone," I said slowly. "Matt and I had plans tonight." Matt looked uncomfortable. "Mom made dinner as a surprise," he said. I didn't want to hurt her feelings. I looked at the 2 plates, the 2 glasses, the candles. I asked, "Where am I supposed to sit?" Linda laughed. "There's plenty of food, sweetheart. I just didn't know when you'd be home. You can grab a plate after you shower. We were just going to catch up, just us." Just them. Matt didn't say anything. I felt invisible, like I was intruding on their date. I quietly said, "You know what? I'm not hungry." I went to our bedroom, shut the door, and cried in the bathroom so they wouldn't hear. A few minutes later, Matt knocked. "Can we talk?" he asked. I opened the door. My eyes were puffy. He said, "You hurt my mom's feelings. She spent all day cooking. You could have at least sat with us." I said, "I asked you this morning if we could have a date night. You said yes. Instead, I walked into a romantic dinner scene I wasn't even part of." "It wasn't romantic," he protested. "She's my mother." "Then why were there only 2 plates?" I asked. "Why candles? Why 2 glasses of wine?" He didn't answer. I said, "I feel like a roommate who pays bills while you two play happy family." He said I was making everything weird and reading into things. That night I slept on the couch. Not because he kicked me out, because I couldn't stand being in the bed where his mother took naps and he pretended not to notice. The next morning I made a decision. I called my older sister and asked if I could stay with her for a few days. She said yes immediately. She'd been hearing pieces of this story for months and was not subtle about her opinion. Before I left, I told Matt, "I'm going to my sister's. I need space. Your mom can stay here with you. You two seem to be the couple right now anyway." He looked stunned. "You're leaving? Over this?" I said, "I'm leaving because you won't set boundaries. I'm leaving because you made a major decision about who lives in our home without my consent. I'm leaving because every time I tell you I'm uncomfortable, you make me feel crazy." He begged me to stay. He said, "Don't let her come between us." I said, "She wouldn't be able to if you didn't hand her the scissors." Then I grabbed my bag and left. Being at my sister's was like taking off a pair of too tight shoes. I could breathe again. I slept through the night for the first time in weeks. She listened to everything and then said, You know this isn't just about his mom, right? It's about him choosing her feelings over yours every single time. While I was there, Matt sent me a lot of texts. Some were apologetic. I'm sorry, I didn't realize how bad it had gotten. I love you, I don't want to lose you. Some were guilt-trippy. Mom is devastated. She thinks you hate her. She keeps asking what she did wrong. Some were defensive. You knew we were a package deal when you married me. She has no one else. After 2 days, he asked if we could meet alone, just the two of us, no Linda. We met at a coffee shop. He looked tired. Probably did too. He said, I don't want my mom to move out onto the street. I said, that was never the choice. She can get a job. She can get a roommate. She can move to a smaller place. We can help financially for a while. But she cannot live with us indefinitely and run our household. He said, she's not running it. I listed everything: the bed, the laundry, the food, the kitchen, the not looking for work, the undermining comments. I told him how it made me feel. He listened, really listened for once. He didn't interrupt. Finally, he said very quietly, I didn't realize how much I was asking you to swallow. I'm so used to taking care of her. I didn't notice she was taking over. I said, I didn't marry your mom. I married you. I'm willing to have a relationship with her, but not like this. Then I set the line I never thought I'd have to say out loud. She needs to move out. We can set a reasonable timeline, we can help her transition, but if you choose to let her stay like this, I can't live there. I won't. He looked torn apart. He said, you're asking me to choose between you and my mother. I said, no. I'm asking you to choose between having a wife and having a third roommate who thinks she outranks your wife. You can still support her. She just can't live in our marriage. We left it there for the day. A few more days passed. I stayed at my sister's. Linda apparently cried a lot and tried to call me. I didn't answer. I told Matt I was only willing to talk to her after we had a concrete plan. Then, to my surprise, he sent me a photo. It was of moving boxes in the guest room. He texted, she's going to stay at an extended stay hotel for a month while she looks for work and an apartment. I'll help with the cost. I told her this was my decision. I stared at the photo for a long time. He followed up with, she's angry. At both of us. She said some things I'm not going to repeat. But I chose us. I just hope it's not too late. A few days later, I came home, not for good, just to see how it felt. Linda was still there, packing. The air in the house was thick. She barely looked at me. When she did, her eyes were cold. I hope you're happy, she said. You've turned my own son against me. I stayed calm. I said, I'm not trying to take your son. I'm trying to live my life with my husband. You're always going to be his mother. But our home needs to be ours. She scoffed and muttered something about ungrateful girls and no respect. I didn't engage. When moving day came, Matt and I helped carry her things to his car. She refused to let me touch anything directly of hers. At the hotel, she hugged him dramatically and gave me the coldest, fakest hug I've ever felt. Linda was still there, packing. The air in the house was thick. She barely looked at me. When she did, her eyes were cold. I hope you're happy, she said. You've turned my own son against me. I stayed calm. I said, I'm not trying to take your son. I'm trying to live my life with my husband. You're always going to be his mother. But our home needs to be ours. She scoffed and muttered something about ungrateful girls and no respect. I didn't engage. When moving day came, Matt and I helped carry her things to his car. She refused to let me touch anything directly of hers. At the hotel, she hugged him dramatically and gave me the coldest, fakest hug I've ever felt. You'll understand when you have kids, she said. If he ever lets you. That one stung, but I didn't give her the satisfaction of reacting. It's been a few weeks since then. Linda is in the hotel, allegedly job hunting. Matt visits her twice a week. I'm okay with that, she's his mother. I've started to feel like my home is my home again. The kitchen is back to my system, the bed smells like my detergent, and the trash can only has trash in it, not my food. But things between Matt and me aren't magically perfect. I still feel a lot of resentment that it took me leaving for him to take this seriously. I still worry that once Linda gets an apartment nearby, she'll try to slide right back into our daily life, just from a different address. We've started couples therapy. The therapist is gently, methodically peeling apart the enmeshment between Matt and his mom. It's not pretty. He's having to confront the fact that he's been trained to put her feelings above everything else, including his own and mine. Sometimes he gets defensive. Sometimes he cries. Sometimes I do. I love him. I don't want to divorce him over this if it can be fixed. But I also made it clear, if Linda ever moves back in without my full enthusiastic agreement, I'm done. So that's where I'm at. My mother-in-law moved in temporarily, tried to take over my marriage and my home, and my husband only set boundaries after I walked out. Now she's in a hotel, he's in therapy, and I'm somewhere between hopeful and exhausted. What would you do in my place? Would you keep trying to make this work and trust that he can really change? Or would this be a deal breaker for you? Let me know what you think in the comments, I read them all. And if you like stories like this, don't forget to like the video and subscribe to Reddit Story Vault for more Reddit drama, relationship chaos, and full stories just like this one.